So let's get started. We are talking about a very important part of our programming that has to do with enabling parents to become the teachers their children need them to be. And that is something that has been a central part of the work that Drs. Krantz and McClanahan have done. And those of us who are operating from those systems continue to see the value and importance of. So what are the goals of home programming? Well, in short, the goals are to help parents become the teachers that the children need them to be. What we want to achieve for the person with autism is an abundance of successful learning, of course. Learning about life experiences and being able to participate meaningfully in life over the lifespan, and to mediate the generalization of skills to novel environments. Home programming is a proactive system that helps us do just that. It's a system where together with the parents, we are planning in advance for the remediation of current problems and the prevention of future probable problems, like the next trip to the mall or the next vacation and so forth. It's not a relationship where we mysteriously fix children. Rather, we deliver services to enable parents enable the children to display their growing repertoire of skills far beyond the walls of school and over their lifespans. We consider home programming an essential component of creating desirable outcomes for learners with autism, especially when you consider the proportion of time spent in school relative to being at home or in other settings. As you can see here, only 30 hours a week in the United States are spent in a school environment. About 82 hours are spent at home and about 56 hours sleeping. And that is if and only if the child gets a full 8 hours of sleep a night. We all know that many children with autism don't enjoy that level of sleep. So even if we think that what we're going to do in the blue bar will magically affect what happens in the red and green bars, we're mistaken. As we all know, children with autism don't readily generalize their skills, so it's up to us to promote that generalization very actively. In addition, when you calculate the total number of hours a child is entitled to school, the entitlement years, they represent only 3.4% of the lifetime hours. Again, if we think that we will magically fix everything outside of those hours in the very, very limited time we have to work with children, we are mistaken. And if I'm not mistaken, in Poland you have even fewer hours to work with a child before they go to regular education. So it takes specific teaching and programming for the generalization of skills outside the school to improve the quality of life for children with autism families. At Somerset Hills Learning Institute and the other programs that are part of ASAI, we have adopted the approach to home programming developed by Drs. Krantz and McClanahan, and in some cases gone on to develop more tools and more systems to ensure that we work effectively with parents to create positive outcomes that we both want for the children. Here you can see some of the systems that we'll go into in a little bit more detail. One key component of our work with families is to help manage parents' expectations, both at enrollment and throughout the time that we're working with them. At Somerset Hills Learning Institute, we communicate expectations of families on enrollment at a meeting where we introduce to them and ask them to sign a team agreement. We also give them a parent handbook. In these documents, we have standardized the kinds of conversations that all ASA programs are having with new families. On individual visits, then, we all operate from agendas to direct observations, conversations, and training for that visit. Let's take a look at these in more detail. Our parent handbook communicates the policies and procedures you see here. Many of these probably look standard to you, but I want to highlight a few. Of specific importance to us is our mission and value statement. It's critical that we have good alignment between what we value and what we're working to achieve. We recognize that there are many different approaches to autism intervention, and we talk about it as selling ketchup. We know there's mustard and relish out there as well, but we sell ketchup. And so we work hard to make sure we're working with parents who want what we offer and will put the energy and time into that. And of course, we want to work with people who value producing outcomes together. Next, we do a home programming overview where we lay out not only those expectations, but how we'll create agendas, how we will work together to teach first in school, get to mastery, have parents come in, observe, and then bring programs home, all to be incorporated into ultimately an activity schedule of activities that is in place during all waking hours. We also have a policy on communication with staff, and that may sound a bit strange, but it is to in fact say communication matters, and it matters so much so that we want it to be in person or on the phone in a conversation rather than in a textual format where perhaps we can misunderstand tone or misunderstand meaning. Let's have a conversation where we can hear tone and where we can, or in person, where we can see the nonverbals that help us have more effective communications. The two-page teamwork agreement details expectations that we have of them and what they can expect from us. As we work with the mutual bi-directional communication to achieve stated goals for their child, not communication in one direction. Partnership-oriented interactions, meaning that one party doesn't dictate to the other. Rather, the focus is on how to work together to achieve mutually agreed upon outcomes. Mutual trust is critical. We have to earn parents' trust and confidence in us. Focus on achievement outcomes. We have to create a trusting environment for families so that they can share openly with us everything that we need to know to do our jobs well, even when perhaps they haven't been able to uphold a prior agreement to implementing a program, let's say, or doing something in their home that we had talked about. And then both parties need to say what needs to be said in a pleasant, empathic way to keep everyone focused on producing the desired changes in the child at home and in the community. Our parents' participation in their child's education is essential, not optional. All of ASCI's member programs have a 2-visit per month minimum for every family. Main goals of visits are to help parents teach their children to use those activity schedules to move throughout their day through all waking hours, morning, after school, and at night, to complete homework chores, to structure leisure time, and so forth. All the ASAI programs communicate expectations on every visit by creating an agenda and giving the parents a copy. Coaching generally begins at school after a child demonstrates proficiency on a given skill. This way, parents get to see, and often for the first time, how their child can, in fact, be proficient at a new skill. Then visits happen at home, where parents are coached on how to help the child display those skills at home. Ultimately, all those skills get compiled into a list of daily activities in the child's schedule that helps the child engage in meaningful leisure, home living, and personal hygiene and homework skills. Other visits are established to obtain inter-observer agreement on the parents' data collection skills, to review the instructional programs, and to provide more coaching. Here's an example of what's included on a staff member's version of a visit to school. There's important data that we're collecting about date, time, and so forth, welcoming folks, including remembering to provide a lot of praise and making this a positive experience, expressing support, and so forth. At Somerset Hills Learning Institute, at the bottom, there's a space to record the number of minutes that a student is engaged in a home activity schedule and how many activities are in that schedule, as a way for both the home programmer, classroom consultant, and in fact, me as the executive director to monitor the frequency of those visits and the development of the schedules. Another type of agenda shown here is about reviewing the sections of the individualized instructional programs that we operate from. This home visit agenda is used to inform parents that a new area of teaching is about to start at school, to invite a dialogue, and provide an opportunity for the parents to give informed consent. Part of our to effective home programming is ongoing, proactive communication with parents at a variety of levels. One way we do this is what we call annual planning meetings. In addition to the IEP meetings here in the United States, where we determine the participants in these annual planning meetings, we determine the parents for highest priority goals for their child during the upcoming year. An agenda for this meeting, and it includes beginning by refamiliarizing parents with the goals of home programming and our expectations, and most important, creating that list of goals for the student. Asking parents to prioritize those, as I just said, or the behaviors of concern and have a dialogue, and then identify potential reinforcers and schedule changes for the coming year. What this does is it sets expectations and helps make clear that we're listening and we're responding to the needs of the families. At Somerset Hills Learning Institute, we also review 1/4 of the instructional programs in a child's data notebook each quarter of the year. And throughout in between, we rely on frequent communication, either in person, at pickup or drop off, or on the phone, to talk about the very many issues that might arise, or issues about data collection and what have you. Staff also record every parent visit in our home programming log. In this spreadsheet, there's a separate tab for each student on which home programmers record all school, home, and community visit information. The date, a brief summary of the agenda, where it occurred, how many staff attended, and the start and stop times. These data get summarized by at the end of the year for each student, and then also across classrooms. This graph depicts the mean number of home programming visits per student per year in the filled circle black line data path, and the number of students per year in the gray bars. For the past 20 years at Somerset Hills Learning Institute, there is a red line. Those data are over the 20 years at the Institute. The red line represents the minimum number of visits, which is the goal for each student each year. As I said, that minimum is just that, a minimum of 2. Our summer program is grouped together as an extended school year, so that makes it a total of 22 visits a year that would be criterion. You can see that on average, we've exceeded this goal for the past 17 years. And you can also see that the average number of visits per child has remained well above the two-month minimum after our first 3 years in existence. Here you see mean number of programming person hours per student, again in the closed circle black line data path. Person hours are computed by multiplying the number of hours for a visit by the number of staff present on that visit. This was summed for each student and then divided by the number of students enrolled to produce a mean each year. You can see that the data path is a little different from the previous graph, and that is because both visit duration and number of staff have quite a bit of range. Depending on training needs, visits could last anywhere from half an hour to multiple hours, and the number of staff can vary from only one, the home programmer, to also including the classroom teacher trainer or myself as the executive director and so on. We evaluate the outcomes of our home programming efforts using a variety of systems. First, at Somerset Hills, our home programming data are reviewed on a monthly basis between the home programmer and the classroom staff trainer to ensure that behavior change is progressing in the desirable direction, and to problem solve it is not through our monthly means review. This is an objective process that Don Baer and I established when I was in grad school in Lawrence, Kansas, working in the public schools. And they wouldn't allow us to have an external evaluator to come in and evaluate our outcomes. Essentially, it's a mathematical formula that is used to determine the amount of change at the end of a month compared to the previous month, and to determine whether that change was desirable, no change at all, or undesirable change. ASA programs review the quality of home program outcome in our staff performance evaluations as part of the evaluation of the data notebook. And we ask our parents to give us social validity ratings as well. Finally, an external evaluator who is not an employee of the program evaluates home programming outcomes as part of the annual notebook review for all programming outcomes at the Institute and all of ASI's programs. On this and the subsequent graphs, you will see data from the ASAI members over the 10 years from 2009 to 2019. This graph shows the percentage of home programs reviewed by that external evaluator. The range for most programs is between 33 and 50%. Some programs have higher percentages. And as you can see, iwrd in Poland has 100% of programs being evaluated in the early years there because they were not in a position, they were not able to have an external evaluator come in. And so in an effort to ensure that there wasn't just a summary of their progress, but in fact, certain knowledge of it, they reviewed all the programs, and that's why their data path is different. Here you're seeing the number of home programming hours. Again, by and large, most programs are providing somewhere in the 500 to 700 or so on average. And then there are some programs doing more than that. Here we see the number of home programming visits. And again, most of the programs are approaching 500 visits for the roughly 30 student population in each of the programs, and again, some more. Here you see the, did I advance that? Here you see the percentage of home programming programs with desired behavior change. Here we're looking for at least 80% of the programs to be scored as having desired behavior change. And you can see that every program in every year has achieved that outcome with the exception of one program in 1 year. And not uncommon when a program doesn't meet a criterion level of performance in 1 year, generally speaking, there is a reversal of that and improvement in the following year, as you see in the 2017 to 2018 comparisons. Here you see summaries of the percentage of home programs with generalization assessments. And this standard of having generalization assessments is something that has been evolving over the 20 years that Somerset Hills Learning Institute is in place and the 10 years that are displayed here. And you can see an increasing trend in the percentage of home programs with generalization assessments for every program, with the exception of iwrd, which had those at nearly 100% levels all of these 10 years. So as an example of a way to build on the systems that Drs. Cranston and McClanahan established, at Somerset Hills Learning Institute, we teach parents what we refer to as contingency management skills. We teach them how to identify their child's initiations. Very often it's with a gesture, or it's with behavior like grabbing them and pulling them to a place, and see those as initiations. And then we teach them how to respond to undesired behavior and how to respond when parents anticipate undesired behavior, all with management of contingencies. And we teach this to the parents across school, home, and community settings, and we teach it across child response repertoires. The goals of contingency management are to help parents identify and create ways to arrange the environment so that their children can gain access to their wants and needs, contingent on displaying increasingly sophisticated social skills. We teach parents to identify a teaching opportunity initially, to make a contingency statement then, very explicitly. For example, when you sit down, I will turn on the iPad. And then to deliver the positive consequence of delivering the iPad only contingent on the requested behavior. We teach parents to do this across settings at school, home, and in the community, and across behavioral context, as I said, initiations, undesired behavior, and anticipating that undesired behavior. And eventually, we move away from those explicit statements of contingencies to implied contingencies. For example, instead of making the statement about the iPad, simply holding it out of the child's reach until the child sits in the chair. We measure the effectiveness of this teaching by scoring the percentage of contingencies parents made correctly, and as well as two child variables, on task and undesirable behavior. Here's an example of outcomes for, for one parent-child dyad over a 3-year period. On the top, you can see the percentage of contingencies managed correctly by the parents in the black closed circles. The blue X's represent percentage of IOA obtained on those observations. You can see that this parent meets criterion fairly quickly, moving through contingencies rapidly as the response effort is increased for them. And the bottom, you see the percentage of individuals with on task and disruptive behavior, and you can see the child does generally very well. In the next graph, another dyad where the progress is not as rapid. It's more variable, but through coaching and ongoing performance, the parents have continued to do well and meet criterion. So we have discussed a number of system variables designed to ensure the effective programming at home for all of the ASAI programs. These variables have been shown over time and across programs around the globe to produce student outcomes at home and in the community. Over the decades, I've heard many parents share just how much more enjoyable parenting and life in general is with their child with autism as a function of this programming. Drs. Cranston and McClanahan were brilliant in arranging so many environmental variables to produce not only successful learners with autism, but happy learners and happy parents and staff as well. Thank you.